Phones ring in rooms ordered to stay dark. On a chalk cliff, a watcher says what he has said since September. Shapes over water, speed 200, height uncertain, course west by north. The words climb through the quiet net binding coast to interior, into a plotting room where thin pencils turn bearings into a moving line. Outside, in a pasture that isn't, cables lie under wet grass, and a petrol-stung generator waits under tarpaulin, its flywheels slick with drizzle. Low-watt bulbs lie cold in their sockets where a runway should be, and oil drip boxes are primed to glow without flame. The field is not a field. It is a promise of safety, somewhere else, if timing holds. Sergeant Gwen Price touches her headset like it's fragile, nods to invisible voices, scratches a vector across grease pencil grids, bearing to bearing, the minute marks counting themselves down in her skull. She is the thread between watchers and choice, between one field that must stay black and one that must briefly lie. The line she draws will tell men when to mimic life and when to vanish, and tell pilots they cannot see whether their base will help them home. The line does not care which cut hurts more. She feels the clock's hand bite, minutes, not mercy. Lent Arthur Mallory stands with his hand above a switch the size of a paperback, the generator behind him coughing once and holding its breath. He has ordered, primed, checked, then checked again, lamps masked from side glare, glow boxes fed to ooze along canvas trenches, field telephones tested twice, slit trenches scraped shallow under hedges where a man can lie and half hear the sky. He delayed the last checks for 5 minutes of drizzle to flatten grass glare, sent 2 men to push plywood aircraft into their marks so that anyone looking down sees a stray wing or a tail and believes in parked weight. He will light or he will not. Both choices, brand. In the Heinkel HPTM, Eric Voss watches condensation bead and tremble on cockpit glass, the motion steady enough now that the navigator's pencil keeps time, sliding across a clear overlay with a line he trusts more than a clouded coastline. Somewhere in the broken cloud, the moon smears itself across vapor and leaves him with a silver memory of an air map studied in daylight. The airfield that matters is a rectangle in his head, a doctrine number. In blackout, a flare path shows if a landing is underway. He tells himself the English love their procedures and that he will find his rectangle if he believes in it long enough to hurt it. Price lifts her head as Army traffic stamps on her frequency, a convoy voice booming through like a man at a public house. She doesn't curse. She changes tone, finds a narrow seam between calls, and feeds a bearing in clipped syllables to ops and the decoy, diction tightening with each interference. Sector control is a map and a clock, but also her breath. The room hears her carve a path the way a seamstress draws a dart in cloth. If the men in the field seize the exact moment, a handful of bulbs will decide whether men wake to fire or to rain. Mallory tastes petrol at the back of his throat as he taps a rheostat box with a gloved finger. The engineer nods, scarf tight, eyes on the ammeter needle that will tell them if the illusion breathes or blares. The lamps cannot blaze. They must flirt, dimming and rising with the rhythm of prop wash and taxi, throwing their light into the grass and not the sky. He made the crew practice being bad electricians, feeding hush into a circuit that wants to speak too steadily. Perfect light is a confession. Half a mile off, a farmer's cart lamp swings and halts as a wheel bogs, the lantern a dot of honey in hedge shadow. A speck is nothing on a map, everything from 8,000 feet, if it sits where logic says it shouldn't. Mallory feels that prick on the back of his neck and sends a runner at a crouch along the hedgerow to intercept, to murmur to a man who thinks fields are fields that tonight they are not, to stop a civilian lick of light riding across his geometry. The real base sits 7 miles west, its shape gone in blackout, but its smell of dope and fuel drifting over roofs, its hum still because ordered to be. Flight Lieutenant Tom Cawley stands over a dim map where counters slide, the clock bigger than rank. He has signed the paper that says no lights, no flares, no beacon, unless blood is being lost right now. He has a flight in readiness and another on patrol. The arithmetic is clean on paper and filthy in the chest. Keep everyone in the dark, even those who need to come home. The call he refuses first will cost him in the morning. Rain thickens and clamps to hedgerows, turning sound into a felt thing. The ground team move like shadows made practical. 2 men push plywood aircraft where silhouettes might be caught by a skimming moon and seized by a mind that wants to see airframes. Canvas wheels wobble, settle, no thump. At the dummy threshold, an oil box is primed to drip and glow with a tremble that looks like heat bloom at an exhaust edge. A third man smooths a blackout tarp over a blown lamp that hissed once and died in a way that would read like a flare if anyone saw it. One mistake could pull bombs left. Voss checks airspeed and adjusts a hair for wind. Instruments behave, but the sky lies by habit, and he knows both intimately. The western wind is stronger than at the coast. His rectangle slides under him, conveyor belt slow. He is riding dead reckoning and his own expectation, and knows that too. Ahead, a suggestion of light could be a careless town or an enemy's taste for routine. He gives time to weapons and a height that satisfies his captain's gut, and leaves no one time to argue. They will commit on pattern, not faith. Pattern is their faith. Price rides the interference like a narrow mountain road. She pulls grid references from voices, knits them. The pencil ticks across dots that become a line that becomes obligation. A question from sector about strength. A click from the real base that should not be there. One beacon, ping and silence. She feels that tremor as the ground warming for a spark. If a trained German ear catches that ping, the decoy will have to sing louder now or be ignored. Cawley leans into his map and out again, a boxer reading a coming blow. He speaks to his beacon team through teeth. No tests, no pings. We are made of absence. He thinks in names and flings the thought away. Tonight, they are numbers, or the story ends with a flare and confirmation for an enemy who is all ears. He looks at the phone that will carry the plea due from a pilot in fuel distress and hopes it's not the one who shook his hand at noon. He will wreck someone's trust in 5 words. The rain slackens and the moon smears again. The field's black ribbon becomes 1 shade lighter. A gloved wrist turns the rheostat. The bulbs respond and the runway breathes, a soft outbreath making shapes into context, then retreating into patience. The oil drip boxes are tested with 1 cupped match. They answer with a low red that licks when nudged by breath. Everything is ready to imply the natural, which is always the hardest trick. 1 bulb too long, and the trick collapses. Voss tilts his head, listening to engines he cannot see. There is a rhythm when a formation turns in consent. He hears it begin, feels a faint shove on his cheek from a crosswind heavier than penciled. The wind has veered 20 degrees. The English, in love with procedure, will align their landing pattern accordingly. He speaks into his mask, cold clarity. Adjust? He will see an airfield that obeys the air, or he will see nothing. Both are intelligence. Price makes the note. Wind shift. She doesn't see grass move. She hears it in pilots talking to controllers, in an observer's aside about smoke trailing sideways at the coast. Mallory will have to rotate a pattern that exists only in his intentions. Align lights to wind. You cannot see directly on the ground at night. She says the number into the field telephone with urgency from precision and imagines men lifting and turning lamps on stakes while the play is already on. Timing is a blade. Mallory nods, catches 2 men by gesture. The dummy runway pivots a few degrees. Hood turned, angle changed, panel shifted, so performance matches weather. He runs little taxi drifts on the dimmer, bringing up and dipping out to look like aircraft rolling to the threshold. He tells the canvas hangar frame to tilt, so its shadow lies where a pilot expects geometry. Belief grows like glass. A steady bulb can shatter it. The generator asserts itself, steadier than it should, killing the flicker. The lamps thrive with parade ground confidence. A uniform pulse betrays fakers. Mallory points, and the engineer moves to a manual dimmer, a rheostat box bled by hand. A damp cloth over the control gives drag and heat. They force breath into the wire like men forcing a heartbeat. They practice ringing life with imperfection, because perfection is a target. Once is error, twice is intention. On the Heinkels nose, the navigator taps his pencil in time. He has the British habit in his notes. In blackout, a landing pattern under wind. Light staggered, never pristine. Procedure visible, even in stinginess. He trusts this because those who live by procedure show their souls to anyone watching. He sketches the turn to bombing run, their rectangle on a ghost of a flare. He will look for a runway, a line to wind, and a stutter at its edge, the signature of pilots rather than engineers. Along the hedge, the runner reaches the farmer. Broad hands that smell of horse shield the lantern. A single word travels without frequency. Please. The lantern disappears under a cloak. The farmer mutters at fields turned into theaters. Mallory doesn't hear, but he sees the honey dot go, wipes rain off his brow, chalks a victory he'll never write in any report. One light removed is one question left unasked. Price notes 2 dots that don't behave, scouts or stragglers. She adjusts the vector with a tiny inflection meaning now, not 3 minutes. A technician at the reel station coughs up a single beacon test, habit, nerves, then falls silent. A ping like a dropped spoon in a quiet kitchen. If Voss hears, the decoy must own him in the next breath. Price's own breath shortens to match the window she's trying to hold open. Cawley bends over the board. No tests, no pings, we are negative space. He thinks of pilots as boys and chooses numbers. He looks toward the dark runway and sees it as a secret that could stop a war if allowed to speak. He lifts a hand and drops it without touching the flare switch. He has ordered himself to let Mercy die for the umbrella it buys. Mercy will ask again in minutes. Cloud sorts lower, not a wall, but a shifting ceiling that droops, then lifts, now 1,500 above the hedges, now 1,000, heavy skirts smudging horizon. Mallory sees why it matters. Their illusion is half made of edge, of suggestion. With horizon muffled, there's no spill. The layout looks too clean. He lifts a lamp hood with 2 fingers and cants it, conspiratorial, to throw small life sideways. Spill must be engineered out of nothing like rumor, risky and convincing. The generator hiccups, then produces output too smooth. The flicker gone, the lamps assert a flawlessness that screams. Mallory holds back a curse. The engineer's fingers find the manual dimmer, the cloth trick takes, the breath returns. The man's eyes flick to the needle and then to Mallory's face, begging without words. Mallory squeezes his shoulder once. Keep it human. Their lie must sound like a heartbeat in a wet room, not a metronome. Lookouts call down what they think they see. There is light where there should be when men land in wind like this, staggered, not uniform, a set breathing like lungs. Voss feels relief creep where suspicion lived, the ease of a pattern matching an idea. He adjusts, the formation yawns in consent. Below, a field that never saw aircraft at noon becomes the night's target by cunning and nerve. He holds a shred of suspicion because suspicion is his badge, but the glow is at the angle wind demands. Price moves a counter. Army convoy chatter crashes back, crackling about mud and missing boots right atop a bearing from an observer near tears because his grid is not clear. She repeats numbers slowly, forcing them into ears that must act. Timing margin is 12 to 18 minutes from coast to target at this speed. Tonight, It's the shorter end. Her pencil dot hops. Estuary now. Next hop is fields and decisions. She won't be the pause that kills someone else's nerve. Collie smells paper, stale coffee, damp wool. Under it, petrol on wet tarmac that must not reflect any light. A pilot he knew as a boy at school calls, confident of his place. Collie's reply is measured and not unkind. No lights. Not tonight. Silence answers. He feels as if he stepped on someone's hand. He keeps his voice even because someone else's heartbeat is about to rely on it. The field telephone buzzes with a wasp's insistence. Mallory hears Price in 1 second, behind the tick. Crossing the estuary, time thin as paper, height 8,000, wind shift west, commit in less than 2 minutes, or not at all. He doesn't look at the sky, he looks at his men and at the switch. The impulse to be early itches, strut for the dark, but early looks like theater. He rehearses a stagger with his thumb, a pilot easing through a curve, and waits. When he moves, it will cost. Cloud drops a handspan, horizon disappears into its own damp. The glow will be contained, proof smaller and more delicate. At 8,000 feet, eyes will search periphery and find less. Mallory tells himself lamps can make their own horizon. He nods to oil box men, ready to drip heavier if edges need fattening. He resists anxious reach. The click will be irreversible. Hesitation here is discipline, not fear. Voss's navigator lays both hands on the mapboard, tension and math. Drift stole more than ink allowed. The wind is a quiet thief. He draws a corrective arc with decisive pessimism. Better catch a target sliding left than overfly and have to hunt back. Voss swallows the mask's metallic taste and warns the formation to expect a breath's delay to drop on the first plausible field. Pragmatism is their other god. If he overthinks, he will miss his window. Price hears the sound she needed. Engines over water change as they meet land and adjust. Not music, but a cue that finishes an equation. She speaks in 3 short parcels to survive the sludge of other voices. Estuary crossed, 1 mile north of plotted line, bearing correction 2 points starboard. The plotting clock ticks like a metronome in a damp room. It doesn't care whose breath is held. She makes it care by moving her hand. Mallory lifts his hand above the switch like a promise to his own nerve. The field is so quiet the drizzle scores canvas. He measures 2 breaths to make 3 seconds, halves them, stops counting before he gets ahead of her voice. He looks down a line of hooded bulbs still dark and sees how they will come up in scatter, not rank. Someone on short final, life happening, safety, living in a lie. He knows that once up, he buys every bomb that finds him. Voss leans into straps, a child at a window looking for light. A bloom appears under ragged cloud. He is not ready to commit. He wants stutter and shambling imperfection, the proof of taxi and late go-around of someone else trusting this field. He keeps his men on edge. He will not reward a sterile line with his bombs. Price, eyes locked to map, hears her own voice inside her head once. An origin, not a relay. Now. She sees how vector intersects field, wind, doctrine. She gives Mallory a 1-syllable command in time with everything else. Drip boxes, hands, rain, fear. The word is a key. Mallory turns it because delay is now a sin. At the real base, Collie hears a returning patrol call, feet dry and low fuel, the voice wearing tired confidence. He sets aside everything else. This choice is next and uglier than the last. He rests a finger above the transmit key like a man avoiding confession. Outside, unseen, the runway holds its tongue. If he lets it talk, it will gossip to every enemy ear. Across the dark field, oil begins to drip, and a gloved hand turns. The dummy runway is a second from pretending to live. The first bombers cross the estuary. Mallory leans in and throws the switch. Bulbs along the black ribbon breathe a hesitant orange, not a proper runway, but the suggestion of one peeking through bad weather and blackout curtains. They stagger, a few dead, a few dim, one that flares then slumps as if shaken by wind. If luck holds, from 8,000 feet, this reads as a busy circuit, not a stage. Glow boxes at the hangar frames sputter. Drip-fed wicks smoke through Hessian like work lamps under a wing. Two men shoulder plywood into place until canvas wheels wobble and settle in ruts, silhouettes canted wrong before they're tugged straight, angles hinting at taxi. The plotting clock ticks loud in the hut, louder than rain on tar paper. Price cups headphones, eyes flicking between pencil and grease arc, voice low and precise as she breathes a corrected bearing into a handset that crackles with someone else's joke. An Observer Corps voice shouts over a stepped-on sentence. She repeats the grid twice, slicing the air with her pencil through interference. If the line wobbles now, the rest of the night will swallow it. Mallory watches the field telephone wire quiver in a gust, insulators beating with drizzle, and hears Price arrive a second behind the tick. West by southwest, 8 minutes to work up. He nods once and flattens his palm to Lewin's by the generator. The petrol set coughs awake behind a sandbag baffle, a smell of hot oil blooming, while the crew at the rheostat pull gloves tight and glance for the rise. A single chop of his hand, now. They bring up the light as if ashamed of it, then let it fall. Above broken cloud, Voss squints over the nose where condensation beads despite grudging heat. He sees the shape he expects, runway edged, a secondary angled to wind, a smudged hint of a perimeter track. The wind has backed to west. The ground pattern has rotated to match. Skill, not artifice, he tells himself. He eases the yoke. Heinkels yaw one after another, wingtips drawing slow arcs toward the glow. He punishes himself for enjoying how easy it looks. He stands men's lives on a stutter in wet grass. A gust rattles canvas doors, drives mist across the lamp line, dulling the spill that was supposed to whisper, busy. Mallory's jaw tightens, horizon glow, gone, edges strangled. He steps behind a glow box, lifts a tin shutter 2 notches to bleed light sideways onto grass, signals the far end to do likewise. He will risk showing a little too much at ground level to make sense at 8,000 feet. If he misjudges, bombs find skin. The generator hunts and smooths again where it shouldn't. Lamps settle into uniform glow. Lewin swears, clamps down the reflex to hit the casing, looks to Mallory. Uniform reads stage. Barker throws a damp rag over the rheostat and rides it by hand, feathering rise and dip, a human heartbeat replacing the engine's vanity. The damp cloth smokes. The smell is a warning and a solution. A steady breath returns. They will wear their fingers thin if they have to. Army signals claw across Price's band again. A lorry stuck at a ford. Men laughing at rain. She squeezes the key, shifts half a channel sharp, slips between mud and jokes. Wait, correction to last. 215, Angels 8, repeat, 215. Her finger maps timing arcs without looking. At 200 miles an hour, the window melts. She steals it back, straight line, unadorned. She ends the sentence on a number, because numbers keep people alive. At the fighter base, Cawley stands over his dim table. The base is a shadow, no perimeter lights, no glow. He wants to light for his men. His boy from Tem is due in 10, and clamps the want under his jaw. He instructs the watch to hold. Any hint will drag the war here when he's already sent it there. He wills the ground to remain negative space. Voss keys the intercom, voice flat to smother a thrill. The English lit a flare path in bad weather and will pay for it. Below, the decoy aligns to the wind he feels. He checks the artificial horizon again. Whoever runs this field knows not to land tailwind. He trusts the pattern over the chart because at night a pilot trusts what looks right, even when wrong. He makes a man's choice, Belief over doubt. The farmer's pony cart, lantern a yellow thumbprint, wanders too near the perimeter. Two silhouettes break from a ditch and lope through wet grass. One presses a finger to his lips, takes the halter, the other cups the lantern. Mallory swings the lamp under his coat and turns the cart in a quiet U. The pony's breath loud, one more civilian light erased before it skews the pattern. It is a small theft that might save a farm. Then a single polite cough across the night. A nav beacon ping from the real base that should not be. Price hears through bone. In the same heartbeat, Mallory signals more spill, more life. He needs his glow to own the attention of men who fly by blinks and habit to drown a dangerous flicker a few miles away. He cannot afford to be second brightest. The wind veers. Mallory feels it on his cheek, sees rain stride sideways. He gestures. The crew jogs lamp to lamp, shifting housings, slewing the fake runway to keep alignment plausible. A real field tonight would pivot circuits to this vector. If his lamps argue, a German mind will look too hard. Time is wet rope under his hands. Overhead, Voss notes a runway that breathes with wind. He files it as confirmation. The navigator claims the map with a finger. Voss lives in the view. He orders bomb doors cracked. Cold air rolls. There will be no art, only the drill that keeps crews alive. They will walk their sticks down a light made to look like kindness. Mallory shapes the runway to look busy. Not clean lines, but a stagger and a lorry transit, suggested by drip glow near the far end. He nods and gives the lamps a breathing irregularity. He imagines Heinkels crews peering through rain, wanting confirmation. He gives them a smoking doubt to cling to, a living field under stress. He has no faith in luck. He has faith in someone else's bias. The Heinkels peels its nose. Trim motors chatter. From 8,000 feet, the decoy's glow fills a hole in cloud like a pocket of safety. Tragedy is that care's appearance invites destruction. Voss calls interval for a stick that will walk the length of light. His voice is steady. In it, the calculus of night war finds expression. Trained eyes, led by deliberate imperfection, deliver weight to grass. At the rheostat, Lewins doesn't trust the generator's mood. He keeps the manual dim by hand. The damp rag smokes gently. The dial quivers. The engine's rhythm matches for a moment the beat of bombing. He closes his eyes as if willing the pattern into safety, opens them to check the master cutout cord is loose, the handle clear, one movement away from darkness. They are 3 steps from a trench that might be enough. Price threads another bearing, a vector for incoming fighters who will arrive late to a party that can't use them. She sends numbers calm, cadence metronomic under pressure. Her pencil draws a curved arrow. If lucky, hot engines won't arrive home over a base that cannot greet them. She speaks to 2 wars, the one above, the one on the ground, and ends with a verb. At the real station, a green star arcs and withers, never becoming a flare path. A humane impulse, shaved to a sputter, almost too much. Price hears it reported. Beacon test, single, ignored. She wipes 2 fingers across her lip and threads. Q sight hold, hold. Now bring minor Southfield up 3 points. Now. Her they to Mallory has edges. He rides them with fingers on copper. In the hedgerow, the farmer grumbles at cut gates. His lantern's amber thread weaves the wrong seam. Mallory's breath catches. One uncommon light makes a pattern twitch. He whispers down the wire. Evans rises from ditch water, collides with the cart, folds a wet sack over the lantern. The lantern hisses. Night retakes its shape. The old man curses them and their theater. Jenkins nods apology and pushes the horse with his shoulder. The scene holds. Interference hits like a gust. Convoy laughter and revs smearing RT. Price is mid-coordinate when Lori at the ford bleeds into her voice, turning her bearing into nonsense. She snaps key off on, shifts half a channel, counts in steady. Wait, correction. 215, Angels 8. Repeat 215. She maps timing arcs and ends on a crisp repeat. She will not cede her seaside of air to a stuck truck. The crosswind shears 20 degrees. In the Heinkel, the drift becomes obvious. The navigator calls a correction, a landing pattern different than 15 minutes ago. Price sends it at once. Wind west by 20, rotate secondary by 6, now. In the field, men push plywood through wet. Shadows fall, wrong then back. Stakes bite soil, breath is loud. They swing the line in time with a weather hand they can't see. They are making procedure visible to a man with bombs. The bombers are close enough that sound becomes geography. First tide roar, then hedges humming, then a vibration in teeth enamel. Mallory hears beneath the main note another hum, offset seconds, the second formation trailing like a postponed verdict. He looks at the master cutout. His hand hovers. He could erase this world into honest dark now. The second wave will then need a glow and might turn toward the real base. He delays. Sermons later. Physics now. Over the downs, the low-fuel hurricane comes back on the air, voice thinner, doing mental arithmetic in a cockpit reduced to breath and instruments. He makes a last request with no expectation. Cawley answers with a vector instead, pointing him toward a black seam over the estuary. Around Cawley, men stare at the dull microphone metal as if it were an altar. In the dark, there are only rituals and the hope they mean something. Above, Voss sees what he wants. A busy circuit under blackout, staggered flickers arguing like pilots, alignment that makes sense with the new wind. The navigator taps a field 7 miles east with a pencil. Voss trusts the evidence under him. He has seen decoys that were too exact, nervous geometry without smudge. Tonight, the stage trembles like human hands. He orders doors open. Cold declares itself at his knees. There is correctness to this lie. A first stick falls. Bombs become brief suns. Each flash shows wet turf, flimsy frames bowing to concussion, a lamp lifted like a kicked star. Soil fountains walk 5 paces nearer to lamp trucks and the trench where the deceit is folded. Mallory feels the cutout lever like bone in his palm. If he kills light now, the second formation will hunt north, toward the real base. If he leaves light up, the next stick may punch through their thin roof. He holds and counts. Price calls angles like prayers. First release 160, second stick lagging, projected impact across Q perimeter in 30. Her lips hardly move, her pencil does not stop. She traces a bomber leader's faith across her map and feels its weight. This is the dark point. There's almost nothing to do but watch decisions arrive. She ends her call with a time because times anchor fear. In the trench, Barker swears as a lamp explodes into glass needles that pepper his sleeve. He stamps a wet blackout tarp over the wound, grinding until the hiss dies. Evans drags a plywood fuselage onto its side as if it had swung off the runway. Imperfection sells. Mallory watches its canvas shadow lengthen under a flash. Theater keeps breathing. He files the thought under survival and will burn it out of his head later. Cloud tears open. The decoy is an island of different light in soaked black. Runway, a clean ribbon, secondary aligned, perimeter dots rolling like tired eyes. Glow boxes leak amber along edge, not too much, not little. Voss's confirmation bias runs hot. The real field, 7 miles west, perfect in silence, might as well be buried. He marks and commits his second stick. He is inside a story. He will finish the tale. A nav beacon ping ghosts the night again, just once, and Mallory feels it in his teeth. He imagines Voss turning toward the true pasture and shoves the fear down. He orders the south lamps to full for 2 breaths, a false cough of flare path. Barker drags the rheostat. Bulbs swell to presence, then stutter back. Above, 2 signals cancel. The aircraft stay on plan. Noise fights noise, breath wins. A different alarm intrudes. Petrol raw in the trench as a jerry can tips in the lamp truck, bleeding shine. Mallory tastes the sums. Cut now and save men. Admit the lie is fragile. Keep it and risk an orange blossom that brings daylight to their graves. He yells for sand and hands. Men slap wet earth over the spill while above a deeper chord fattens. The second wave's hum becoming weight. The smell of petrol is a fuse someone could trip by thought alone. Colley puts his hand over the flare switch as reflex when a signal officer calls, "Unknown aircraft over sector, second wave." He lifts the hand back away, as if burned. He orders the next patrol to orbit short, denies landing to his own, and across black air, a pilot promised nothing counts fuel with courage. Price narrows to her line. Time to target for the second wave is 8 minutes. If the decoy dies now, the shadow slides over the real base. She gives Mallory 8 minutes in the purest word she owns. This is a choice the decoy books don't footnote. Run a lie long enough, and it endangers those who told it. Price breathes. Hold 2 more runs if you can. The truth under that is a cut. If he holds and they live, the network stays invisible and useful. If he cuts and the second hunts, the truth of their craft will sail over hedges that never knew war. Mallory leans on the cutout like a man sizing up a fall. A delayed bomb walks closer, a shortfall making physics personal. It arrows toward the lamp line. They see its line through canvas and bone. Barker dives for the emergency secondary cut, wired to the nearest lamp circuit. He yanks. Half the south edge dies. In the same breath, a blast lifts turf where a lamp would have lived. The night goes white. For a part of a second, faces are strangers. The habit of thinking you'll die slowly is wrong. It happens like a door slam. The Heinkels adjust, puzzled by a dark lapse in a strip that should be continuous. Voss reads it as filament failure, credible in rain, and delivers his third stick along the imagined taxi route. He is deep inside a pattern he has chosen to trust. It carries bombs as surely as racks. He has work left to do. Doubt is for the mess and the map room. The convoy that stole Price's sentence finally grinds across a bridge. Interference thins. She seizes the clean beat and pushes a new bearing for the second formation, a nudge aligning their next vector with the decoy's false perimeter rather than the real base's dark rectangle. In speaking, she discovers again the weird power of syllables to move metal. She ends with a repeat, not a please. Another lamp goes with a hiss. A blown bulb rolls in wet grass. Evans stamps it twice. Rain makes the glass spit. He drags a cloth over what's left until it stops exhaling light. The little acts of concealment feel intimate against the orchestra above. Mallory feels a jagged joy at having got any of it right in a world that punishes intention. He files that joy under later. Dawn tries to creep into eastern hedges and is beaten by weather. A fox patrols its field, pauses at a fresh crater to sniff warm soil, moves on, indifferent. Mallory sees it and is superstitiously grateful for a witness who won't testify. He lifts his hand from the cutout. The second wave demands a field to eat. He will not starve it prematurely and feed it something worse. Approach in the Heinkel is math-made muscle. Voss rubs his oxygen mask against his cheek, procedure softening nerves. One more run, then egress on northwest, cross the coast, add to a ledger that tallies only damage. He trusts eyes more than instruments. The English move fields by will. He does not know men in sacks over boots turn lamps up and down by damp rag to imitate his own squadron's raggedness. He will write that they hit an airfield. Someone will believe him. The hurricane breaks coastline at wave height, motor coughing like a man refusing surrender. He sees black and patience and the idiot grin of waves. He chooses a darker ribbon between two darks and puts wheels over a field that's a rumor more than land. He only learns later that men took light away to keep it from others. Cawley closes his eyes when the radio goes dead, opens them on the next decision. Command is forgetting mercy you still feel. The second formation's hum resolves into shapes, black lozenges shedding resonance. In the trench, men touch the walls the way one touches a horse to steady themselves. Price reads ticks backward on her plotting clock and makes peace with fractions. Coastal sighting to target can be 10, 12, 18 minutes. She's lived in those numbers long enough to hear them sing. All stations stand by, she breathes, as if anyone isn't already kneeling. A delayed stick lifts the lamp trucks onto their springs and drops them like beasts. Glass spits dust. Diagrams said slit trenches were enough. Diagrams lie. The second wave isn't trailing the first. Lead elements have fanned, hunting for a sighting point, for any flare, for a human mistake. Price hears the search pattern on the board before she hears it in the air. Mallory tastes iron. He grips the cutout again. He doesn't pull. It will matter when he does. In the Heinkel, the navigator asks the hinge. Secondary beacon gone. Switch target? His finger taps another field's name. Voss, eyes on the tremble that has been faithful, shakes his head with economic risk. Finish what we started. He doesn't see a little glow far away, blinked once, then died, because a man said no. He sees only what matches his choice. Mallory hears the second formation thickening, the song adding mouths. The first pattern creeps toward the trucks by habit. He reaches for the lever and inhales until ribs hurt. He looks at Barker, at Evans, at men whose names live nowhere official. They look back, caught between ticks, knowing the next bomb will walk toward them. If he keeps lights alive, it means maybe the pattern walks past. If he kills them, the night might turn left and find the real field waiting. The board balances on his slow fist. A new engine note peals from the harmonics. Closer, slower, as if one bomber is dragging. On the cutout, the second hand reaches the 6. Mallory loses the count and moves on instinct. He is still mid-breath when another sound arrives behind the cord, deeper, nearer, the voice of metal on earth he did not expect. The ground growls with tires on wet sod and a low propeller wash. For a white-hot instant, Mallory imagines a straggler landing among them, then sees the silhouette, a tractor with a cart, lanterns swinging like a wayward star at the perimeter, its yellow eye drifting into the geometry he has sold to the night. The arc throws a real shadow in the wrong place. From cloud, a stick coughs dirt off the western edge as if scenting the deviation. Jenkins is already moving. Price bites her breath at the desk, threading bearings through static while Army complaints leak back in. Formation 2, bearing 270, height 6 to 8, crosswind 30 degrees, she sends. The reply is a faint click she chooses to hear as assent. Mallory presses a handset so hard he hears blood and asks if Cawley is still blind. Yes? The line holds. He buys 2 more minutes with that yes. Cawley's fist sits where his finger used to hover. In his office radio, Discipline scratches at glass. A single ghost ping from earlier still hangs like a crime in his head. The hurricane is a man with a voice and a breath like frost, pleading an angle on a runway that doesn't exist. Cawley leans in. Orbit the estuary dead quiet along the perimeter. No flare, not a match. Drifted bombs sound like wolves. Wolves go to the largest glow. He refuses to be it. The generator hiccups once and steadies when it shouldn't. The engineer spreads his damp rag and rocks the dimmer with his whole body, lending the lamps a human beat. The runway calls itself alive in a ripple. The bulbs don't burn. They breathe. In the hedge, the farmer's lantern floats closer, threatening to stitch a wrong brightness across a hard-won perimeter. Jenkins hisses from the ditch. "Lamp!" Snatches, pinches the top, and starves it. The night heals just as a brace of bombs stitch up the wrong seam. A hinge keeps turning. Above, the Heinkels shear as Voss presses his forehead to cold glass. The glow blooms exactly where the pencil says. The crosswind has ticked, the ground swung to match. He tells himself a busy field under blackout takes the wind over the map. A taxi light flickers, bob over ruts. He chooses the middle track and calls the release. Gravity decides what happens next. Mallory clamps his hand on the lever, looks at the rheostat man, past him to Corporal Jenkins slinking along the fence. Mist thickens in the hedges. Decoy horizon shrinks. New sticks walk in, earth splashing. He could cut and save men. He could hold and save the base. He holds. They bought this timing with weeks of drill. He will spend it now. "Rotate pattern, 20 west, now," he orders. He makes their lights behave like someone landing from the other side. Crosswind makes his order plausible. Shields lift. Tin lips spill light. Lampheads swing on their stakes. The layout slews, turning into wind. A plywood aircraft rotates. A shadow in Hessian turns like a hangar mouth adjusting to traffic. The lie layers itself thick enough to pass for truth, seen at speed. 8,000 feet, broken cloud, drizzle, nerves. He sells messy continuity. Voss buys. Price catches a clean second, where convoy voices lift and slides through. Decoy, second formation 3 miles, parallel to first, adjust to primary, ready cut on my mark. She holds pencil over grid, clarity moving like a dry tongue over teeth, a breath of bedrock under swamp of chatter. She can't see Jenkins or muck under Mallory's nails. She sees vector, hears conclusion. Her mark is a hinge. Cawley hears the second wave on a separate circuit, resists impulse to show love in green sparks. He picks math instead. An intact base will land more broken fighters than any flare could save tonight. He tells the hurricane to follow the river's black and his voice. Somewhere out there, a corporal with a hooded lantern is half a flare. It will have to be enough. He sells patience to a man with none left. A Heinkel in the second element slides on cross-current. Its bombardier rolls his thumb, waiting for the pulsing glow to align. He reads a lamp bob as an engine light bouncing over ruts and smiles with his eyes at English carelessness. Sway, jetst. The second stick drops jagged, chews turf along the rotated pattern, walks toward the lamp trucks like a sleepwalker toward a well. Mallory sees it coming and turns the trench into an idea of home. He waits until fountains spit grit into the trench, then punches the cutout, swallowing everything to instant dark. Sound remains. Without light, there's nothing to fix on. The engineers freeze, palms on metal. A bomb falls late. Its flare is the first light in seconds. It shows Jenkins's teeth bared in a grin you'd call feral if it weren't relief. Timing can be a surgeon or a butcher. You find out when you cut. Up small, edge only, Price says, counting the breath she gave him back. They feather the edge markers to a whisper, the runway all but memory save a taillight for a late comer. This is the craft's payoff. At 8,000 feet, truth is a flicker obeying wind and moving with human error. They open a sliver. They ask the sky to choose it. Voss does. He curses gently. The glow died like a trapdoor, then returned like a thoughtless hand hit a switch. He shifts formation marginally south, chasing the glimmer. Final adjustment before the belly goes dry. The navigator's pencil taps rhythm against his thigh. He has seen real fields wink like this, stingy to save their lives. He decides the decoy is not. Illusion only asks that much. He pays in bombs. Back at the real station, the ground remains black, a body rather than a hole. Cawley hasn't yielded. Rage and thanks measure each other. He can hear bombs fall and know they are cracking hedges and not hangars. He also knows a man he could save circles a river, guessing at distance. "Turn now, east across the marsh. Follow my voice," he tells him. The plodding clerk ticks a faint echo offshore that might be phantoms or friends. He refuses to guess. The cloud drops again, stealing the edge signal. The illusion shrinks. Mallory orders shields up a notch, tells his men to break training's neatness, leak a little light into grass to show halos. A flicker steadies too long. The engineer uses his pulse, counts in his head like rocking a child. Uniform glare kills. Messy life sells. Barker's fingers are bandages over copper. The farmer stands by Jenkins, cap in hand, lantern cold at his chest, trembling a question about whether it's the Germans or practice. Jenkins doesn't explain that nothing here has been practiced since autumn, that men die to make lies believable, that even the fox owes its life to someone hurting their hands on tin. He tells the old man to hold the lantern ready but dark. If a truck overturns into fire, a small honest light may pull someone out. From the Heinkels, the world is a half-remembered chessboard. The navigator corrects for drift against a sliding glow. He says the field has shifted to take wind, good pilotage. He is wrong in his details, right in his habit. Habits make men commit. Their bombs fall across grass where Hessian trembles, where frames the size of barns pretend to be hangars. Shrapnel rattles on tin and tells the men above that they hit something shed-shaped. Reports write themselves. Another blast lifts the lamp truck's tarp. A cable spits. A filament burns like hair and dies. The smell of hot glass. Mallory reaches for the truck, can't let the petrol heart burn, and his sergeant hauls him back with authority born of watching him too long. Perfectionism dies when dirt hits your teeth. They stamp tarp into mud. Darkness wins another inch. They have saved their own hammer. They will need it tomorrow. Price hears from sector. Beacon anomaly acknowledged. Enemy still homing on secondary. She writes one thing at the margin. Decoy taking. It's why she sat drills, all for a small sentence that means the difference between opera and quiet. She thickens the second formation's arrow. She will sleep with that line in her jaw. Cawley hears it too, allows a millimeter of slack in his jaw. He tells the Hurricane to be ready to deadstick at the auxiliary strip, a ribbon of hard earth in marsh, and sends a corporal with a hooded lantern to the verge. He doesn't touch the flare pistol in the corner. He looks at it without seeing. Comfort you cannot use turns into weight. He leaves it alone. The second formation doubles back in a delayed walker, a dog refusing to drop a bone, then lightens. Voss tells his men to turn home on the chalk track in his mind, congratulating modestly on clipping English teeth. He will see nothing of the real base since it stayed blind. The men below have chosen absence over relief and have bought themselves tomorrow. He will drink black coffee and believe he denied them theirs. The ground at the decoy is black geometry, steam rising from craters like breath. Hessian on false hangars trembles like skin in a draft. Mallory orders hold, expects stragglers and lates. Bombs behave like men, reluctant to let go, then finally giving when no one looks. The mist pools in hedgerow, makes new rivers. Sound ranging picks up a faint tail east to west, then nothing. Quiet becomes a thing you can touch. Then a far promise, the last you fear, then even that is gone. Price watches for a third mark crossing the coast. Nothing comes but trucks still discussing a bridge. She thinks she'll strangle them in their sleep and laughs in her throat because she still has to land a Hurricane with only a voice and a river. She calls the auxiliary strip where a corporal in a canvas hood stands shin-deep in marsh and instructs him to be the Galaxy. He lifts his lantern under a coat. His hand is steadier than his breath. Cawley gives the mark he kept like a strap in his teeth. Now! In the marsh, the lantern peels open the smallest green you've ever seen. The Hurricane drops its nose and its prayers, finds the river, the strip, the corporal, the ground. The path is a point, a hand, a sense of distance. The wheels kiss mud, slide, then hold. Back at the station, no one lights anything. A man leans on a wall while his legs stop shaking. Mallory doesn't trust the quiet. He raises the decoy edge one more breath to draw wolves. None come. The landscape he borrowed reads itself back into hedges and ruts. A fox, wet to its knees, slinks through new holes and stops to listen to a sky that has stopped spitting. It is small and a large point. The only thing they built was a story the enemy needed to believe long enough to waste their song. They slide the generator's choke and let it die by choice. Cables lie like snakes with rain on their backs, bite postponed until the next night men sit in trenches and hold phones like talismans. Jenkins, allowed a very small and very local flame, checks on the farther trench and finds men alive with mud on their teeth, grinning like gamblers who risked a farm and won a chicken. The farmer sets his cap and says he won't take a light out in a war again unless someone orders him. Jenkins says good. Voss counts fuel and sea miles and does not know the runway he hit was grass and imagination. He will report a base that lit and died, and his superiors will notch a map that lies by omission. Somewhere, a man will marry his words to a photograph of frames and shadows and be careful and skeptical and still file it as damage. Certainty is peacetime. Tonight they live by approximations and courage. Price lays down her pencil, shorter by an inch she would have liked to keep, and writes one final line. Q site engaged, believed successful, real base intact. She will roll the words into her sleep and wake with grit behind her teeth. The phone will ring. She will pretend her nerves are wire. The Dowding system is not radios or glass beds alone. It is people choosing to hold breaths together. Cawley walks the runway in his head, counting aircraft he can't see, counting losses he didn't write. He will shake a pilot's hand in the morning, and neither will mention the flare pistol, like men who don't talk about letters unsent. They will look south where the decoy sat and nod the way men do when acknowledging a service that cannot wear a medal. He will assign a fatigue party to patch the cutouts with tape. He will say they did well and mean it. Mallory steps out of the trench and takes wet air on his face, the drizzle thinning. He looks across broken grass at plywood aircraft and at hangar frames with tar-painted shadows and loves their stupid audacity, the way a father loves a child who lies well for right reasons. He will file about a generator that smoothed when it shouldn't, a manual rheostat that saved them, a farmer and a lamp, and he will recommend decoy patterns be kept flexible to crosswind shifts because the Luftwaffe are men, and men read wind like fear. He will write it dry. He will remember it wet. At first light the fox returns, brush heavy with rain, trotting unconcerned across a cratered strip where hangars never stood. The decoy is a landscape of intact illusions, frames unburnt, cables unbitten, props and painted shapes drying. In the distance, muted by ground mist, real fighters taxi in shadow along a runway that never glowed, engines coughing awake. Men live because someone else told a careful lie. Mallory rubs his thumb over the dent his glove made in the cutout's handle and looks at the lamp heads aligned like dumb sentries. He turns to Lewins and Barker and Jenkins. They start counting how to lay it again by nightfall.